Hello, everyone. I'm Randy Arrington, and welcome to our fourth episode of Page Valley Living. We're here today in the Page County Government Center, where we'll be talking to Nina Fox, the Director of Economic Development and Tourism for Page County, and the Communications and Marketing Coordinator, Rebecca Armstrong, about their proposal to build the Page Valley Cultural Center and Business Hub near the intersections of Routes 211 and 340 in Luray. We'll explore the motivation behind the project, specifics of the plan, and how it might all be paid for in just a few moments. But first, before we go over to results from Tuesday's local elections, let's tell you a little bit about our sponsor, Luray Caverns. From well-lighted paved walkways, explore cathedral-sized rooms with ceilings 10 stories high, and walk among huge chambers filled with towering stone columns. Come visit Geology's Hall of Fame, only at Luray Caverns. Visit them online at luraycaverns.com to plan your trip today. We are filming on Thursday, November the 9th, and our fourth episode of Page Valley Living will be airing on Friday, November the 10th. We hope to return to our normal weekly schedule on Wednesdays soon. And now for the Page County 2023 election results. On Tuesday, Page County Sheriff Chad Cubbage retains his seat for a third four-year term after defeating independent challenger Aaron Cubbage, a captain in the Stanley Police Department and Chad's first cousin, by a margin of just 351 votes among the more than 8,800 ballots cast. Incumbent Grayson Markowitz will remain clerk of the Circuit Court for another 8 years after winning a four-way race by a narrow margin of only 7 votes over former staffer Kim Bailey, who made a strong showing in the southern end of the county. Becky Smith easily captured another four-year term as Commissioner of the Revenue by nearly a 2-to-1 margin over independent challenger Tom Boserman. District 2 Representative Alan Louderback retained his seat on the Page County Board of Supervisors. By only 129 votes over Paula Kibler, there were almost 1,800 ballots cast in that race. Chris Reisinger won a seat on the Shenandoah Town Council by only 49 votes over challenger Brenda Frazier Haggett in a special election that drew 741 ballots. Reisinger, an industrial arts instructor at Page County High School, will fill the remainder of a term left by Russ Comer, who stepped down from the council this past summer. Commonwealth's Attorney Brian Cave, Treasurer Penny Gray, they were unopposed on the ballot, as were Districts 3 and 4 seats on the Board of Supervisors. They'll be filled by Ryan Cubbage and Isaac Smeltzer, respectively. The same goes for 4 seats on the Page County School Board, as Taylor Alger, Michael Overfelt, Renee Bryant, and Dwayne Painter were all unopposed for seats in Districts 1 through 4, respectively. Overall, for the 2023 election, just over 9,200 ballots cast among 17,244 registered voters in Page County. That's an overall voter turnout of 53.4%. During the 2020 presidential election, that figure reached almost 75%. In the world of sports, Luray High School's Davy Johnson is going to be going for a state title on Saturday in Salem at the VHSL Class 2 cross-country championships at Green Hill Park. You've got to get your tickets in advance online. You can check the VHSL website or pagevalleynews.com to get more details about that. Coming up this weekend, there are Veterans Day ceremonies in all 3 towns. Make sure you check Facebook and other listings for times. I believe it's 11 a.m. in Shenandoah and Luray, 4 p.m. down at the Fire Hall in Stanley. And now, folks, let's turn our attention back to Nina Fox and Rebecca Armstrong and the Page Valley Cultural Center and Business Hub. First of all, ladies, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Randy, for having us.
Appreciate seeing you again, Rebecca. We spent a few years together at the newspaper there, and now you're doing a great job for the county. I know a lot of folks are very, very proud back at the paper. Ladies, there's been a lot of confusion out there about this project. You know, I think there's been a lot of back and forth, accusations, assumptions, and this according to your presentation to the Board of Supervisors on Monday night. Let's start with one of those. The fact that what you're proposing here, this project, is not a traditional visitor center. Now, why is that?
Well, number one, traditional visitor centers are no longer that effective. And we believe that it's a staple in the tourism community. It's a staple for our community. And we were looking at ways that it could be part of a combination of different things that will draw more visitors in. A management plan was presented to the Board of Supervisors in July of 2021, which they voted to support. And in that management plan was the strategic placement, possibly of a new center as well as rest stops. We've known, and I've known for years working in the tourism industry in Page County. For 8 years, I worked at the Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center, left, and then came back. But during that entire time, I've always been involved in the tourism industry in Page.
And there's been a couple of reincarnations or versions of this. I've heard some people talking 20 years ago there was an idea talked about this. And of course there was a plan that Liz Lewis worked on. But this one's different, right?
This one's different, yes. I mean, since the day that the Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center moved off of Main Street, out of that original location where Uncle Buck's bar area is right now, it moved into a temporary location where the ice cream store is now, and then from there went on to the train depot. And at that time, people were still using visitor centers as a point of interest, as a place to gather information. But now with this digital era we live in, I mean, you have a handheld visitor center in your hand anywhere you go with your mobile devices.
Well, that leads us right into our next question. Good point. Right. So what will this center, let's talk about a couple of specifics. What will this center offer that, a traditional visitors center, wouldn't?
Well, I don't want to take the whole lead on this, but I am very passionate about this project,
sure,
as many people know. The visitor center, if you think of it in the sense of like a pie chart, in my opinion, would be really about 1/8 of what the center really has to offer. It is not going to be prominently just a visitor center, but it is a center for tourists to come to learn more about our area, our history, our culture, a place to be able to view offerings that the community has. There are so many people that already visit our area as tourists. They're day travelers to Luray Caverns, the Shenandoah National Park, and they're never coming into our downtown districts, yet alone the town of Stanley or Shenandoah, which we're also responsible for. We are the Page County DMO. Our sole responsibility is not just to one particular area, but the county as a whole. And we feel that leveraging a center along the 211 corridor that would be more accessible to so many of these day travelers will yield tremendous results for our whole community.
Well, you were talking location is what they say, right? So the 211 corridor, and it's certainly close to where 3 intersects with 340, a lot more traffic.
Yes.
And I guess the idea hopefully to stop more people.
Exactly. And, the property actually is visible by the 340 corridor, the on-ramps to 211, and the off-ramps. So the visibility is huge. It is location. And when, based on some very initial traffic studies, the majority of our visitors that come to our area are coming from Washington, D.C., the metropolitan area, and they're coming down 66 corridor into Front Royal through 340. They get on the bypass, they stop at Luray Caverns, they leave the caverns, they get back on the bypass, and then completely bypass everything. And there's no places to stop between the Luray Caverns and the Shenandoah National Park other than Yogi Bear's or Brookside Restaurant. Right. There's no rest stops. And it would be nice to have some type of offerings where people, once they get back on the car and say, oh, we need to stop really quickly before they're completely out of town. Right. And we believe that will make a difference. And
well, let's talk about the plot. It's a 9-acre plot. Folks who've been around here for a while know that a lot feel that the county overpaid for it, but that was years ago. That was 15 or so years ago. We won't talk about that. But it's been talked about. At one time, they were looking at putting a new government center there. They were looking at putting the Luray Volunteer Rescue Squad there. And the one issue I want to go ahead and clear up now is that one of the things that held them up from some of those projects is a portion of that land is in a flood zone. So you've already thought about that, right? So.
Yeah, that's correct. Probably, this is just a very rough estimate, but I would say about a third of the property sits in the 100-year flood zone. In the plan that Liz Lewis had developed a few years ago was around a community center. And in that conceptual design plan that the Cornerstone project from Virginia Tech yielded, showed that parking was perfect for that location.
Right.
And there's a lot of parking actually that's been developed in many communities with any type of waterways that allow that for parking. And so it's not, it doesn't interfere with the structure.
Well, Rebecca, I know you've been very involved in the project as well, and that's why Nina asked, wanted you to be involved in this. So talk a little bit about what is the overall vision here. What do we hope to accomplish by doing this?
I think overall to continue to increase overnight visitation. We find that the majority of our travelers come from Northern Virginia. They're repeat guests. So we want to continue to encourage return trips and longer stays. For the folks that are maybe just going up and down the roadway and not coming into town, it's an opportunity that maybe this time they're not staying with us, but next time they will.
So heads and beds is still the mission.
I think heads and beds, but whereas transient occupancy tax is designed to continue to increase overnight visitation, we see this as a way to help so much more, and even more beyond just what's considered the basic tourism industry partners. We think it truly will help local businesses. We think it will help our local attractions even more. We think it'll help the tax base.
Well, that flows right into my next one. The vision is that it will help, it will improve, it will increase things. But there is a concern, particularly from folks in downtown Luray, that it's going to pull people away rather than draw them in. You all have the opposite view.
We feel, and especially my personal opinion right now, because we are still assessing it, but I feel, and when we look at other visitor centers, especially in downtowns, those are great places, but those are places that generally people who are already downtown are stopping by. They're not necessarily coming out of the way to get to them.
Right.
So these are also, because they're return guests, a lot of the people that end up at that visitor center are coming every time they come for a season. And that's great because it shows what a welcoming staff that center has.
Right.
But whether that center was there or not, these guests would continue to patronize and support downtown Luray.
Right. Nina, I would pose the same question to you about that, because that's one of the big points. That's one of the big pullbacks that you guys are getting right now on this project is a draw away from downtown. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm really actually confused by that statement or that sentiment in general, because Rebecca's absolutely right. And a lot of the research and the things that we are looking at, it's like a visitor center and an outlet. People aren't going to the outlet because the visitor center exists there. They'll stop at the visitor center because people are already there. And that's the overall sentiment of visitor centers in general. Mm-hmm. If we create basically a center that becomes also an attraction, a place that pays homage to the culture and the history of our area, also to the development of the Shenandoah National Park, we picture a multifaceted center, then we will be able to draw more people in that we're never going to stop in downtown, and then hopefully push them into that direction. Right. This property, as you mentioned, the flood zone, it does tie into the Hawksbill Creek as well as to the Greenway. Part of the vision is to create a walking path that will tie in the guests that are visiting the center to walk onto the Greenway and walk right into downtown Luray. And we would encourage that type. And then down the road, many years from now, when it shows positive yields and revenue, we would love to one day even see a trolley service that takes off from there, and then that will take people to the caverns and take people to downtown Luray and then take them to Stanley and Shenandoah and have a little tourism circuit that people get to enjoy on weekends that are common in places like Charleston, South Carolina, Wilmington, and places like that. You know, we are perfectly positioned here in Page Valley to really truly be a tourism hub and to define what that hub looks like. We are home to two of the largest mid-Atlantic attractions, the Shenandoah National Park and the Luray Caverns, and the momentum's here. And we believe that growth is important, but strategic growth is really at the center of what we want to do, and we want to promote a quality tourism experience.
I think a key point that you wanted to make, I know you led off kind of with this on Monday night with the board. Nothing's been done yet. This is a proposal, and the details are actually being developed as we go on. So no money has been spent, although there was $200,000 earmarked for a study. It seems like the supervisors wanted to go a different way on that.
Yeah, they keep saying for a study. That's not true either. I just want to clarify that right now. $200,000 was basically a surplus from fiscal year 2022. We received about how many? 140,000?
$60,000 in grants.
And
Okay.
grants funding with projects that we were already planning on doing. So when we received the funding, that opened up a huge portion of our budget.
Okay.
Also, we had set money aside for TOT events, like the triathlon, for example,
Sure.
or the racketeers and things like that qualify for true tourism initiatives, not
Sure.
community initiatives. The legislation dictates how that money should be spent, and not all of those funds were fulfilled that year. So there was a we had a surplus, and we don't really have a fund balance. So we said, why don't we earmark these funds for the future development, whether it's studies or feasibility or due diligence or even building it at some point. We already knew what our upcoming budget was going to be, and so those funds were not obligated at that point.
Okay.
And our responsibility and obligations from the department were fulfilled through state and federal dollars. So we thought it was a great opportunity to put some money aside that didn't negatively impact our ability to market,
Okay.
and really had no negative effect on what our operational costs. So let's earmark those funds, set them aside if this is a plan we'd like to pursue, because we're very fiscally conservative people in our group and in our department, and we don't want to see us get in over our head. We don't want to be in starting off in a deficit. So
Sure.
if there is ways that we can cover the cost up front without even loans,
Right.
we would like to see that
Right.
that happen. So that was the purpose of the 200,000, and that was just and they don't have the authority to do that. So the tourism council. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say let's expand on the finances, because let's talk about how it will be paid for. TOT funds, initial upfront cost estimated $3.5 to $5 million. Most of that through either federal loans or grants, and then annual maintenance through TOT funds. Is that correct?
So basically, exactly, the loans and the repayment of the loans would all be funded through TOT. Our plan does not ever have a place where we envision this being a burden on the residents.
Okay.
And and like we said, this is just a vision. And if we can continue to, maybe it's a possibility that this doesn't happen in the next year or 2 years, but maybe we start saving money and we're earmarking money and setting aside for these projects. Mr. Latter may,
how you've changed the course of how it's been projected in the past, whereas in the past they worked really on a projection, and when she came in, she changed it.
The actual
the
figures.
Budgets are not until it's already accumulated from the
So
previous year.
if TOT funds are diverted to maintenance, upkeep, staffing of this facility, does that mean that current recipients, the towns, certain events, triathlon, fair, other groups, that they are not going to receive funds?
No, that's not the goal at all, and I don't envision that happening.
Okay.
Really, we are looking at the increase to TOT we have received year after year after year shows a significant, it's significantly increasing, and we are looking at ways of being more creative, but we don't want to just spend the money to spend the money. We want to spend the money where the money is effectively spent and empowers these businesses. If we get to the point, who knows, possibly down the road it might be a rebate to businesses that collect the funds.
Okay.
What that looks like, we're not quite there yet.
But the actual staffing would be funding shifted over from the current visitor center, right?
So ideally, in this very, very early planning, because this has not been evaluated to that detail, but in my mind, as of today, and you asking me, what I would love to see is that right now the Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center, it's in reality is two entities. It's the Chamber of Commerce piece, and then it's the Visitor Center piece. We fund half the salary of the director, or I'm not sure what Gina's title is, but Gina's, Edison, and Clancy's.
She's president.
President, okay. So we fund half of their salaries, each one of those staffers. And then we fund the full salary of the part-time tourism associates.
Okay.
In addition, we have my role, Rebecca's role, and English's role.
Sure.
It's more than enough people to run a visitor center. And
Okay.
it really is. And so we would ideally...
So that's kind of a net wash.
It's a net wash, exactly, yes.
Okay.
And so I think it'll work out really well in that regard.
Now, one goal that you mentioned, and Rebecca, I'm going to come back over here, that was in the plan was talking about enhancing collaboration. Can y'all expand on that?
I think Nina should take it, because that really is her brainchild.
Sure.
Well, coming on board to in this role in 2021, I never realized how much public sector, in a sense, and this is not an insult, but people operate in their silos. They operate in their lane, like this is a town initiative, or this is a chamber initiative, or this is and it really is interesting coming from my background in private sector. When there's an issue that you're facing in a company, you throw everything at it, including the kitchen sink, and every single department works towards that solution. And it's different in government.
Right.
And I think some of those hindrance sometimes is because we're competing for the same funding, but also the isolation of being in separate buildings. And so the idea here is, especially with the business hub, really would create a fantastic opportunity for more collaboration. We work so closely with SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. Economic Development works closely with the Chamber of Commerce's. We work closely in these areas because each organization has a different role when it comes to business development, retention, networking, recruitment, funding, etc. And sometimes people will come to our office asking for advice or assistance, and then we have to we're like, well, no, that's more of an appropriate fit at the chamber, or that's more of an appropriate fit with SBDC, or this is where we are.
Trying to bring it together.
And so, exactly, and there's communities that have business hubs that have been tremendous, and that collaboration, being in the office together, where a business can come in and we can all go to his conference room and brainstorm collectively what needs to be done to get them off the ground.
Right.
What an effective way to work together, and that collaboration is what I see as just what we're missing in our community.
Very well. Well, I think that's a very good point. Now, you had said before, I want to reiterate that point, that no money has been spent at this point. You said the newspaper got that wrong. You meant the print newspaper,
The
right?
print newspaper,
Okay,
yes, sir.
very well, not PVN. But to add on to that the next step, so it sounds like the next step is your office is going to develop a business plan that then is going to be presented to the supervisors in January. Is that correct?
Well, and then alongside that, they would like a steering committee, and I think someone
Yes.
to evaluate, the importance of this. Also,
Do you think that'll be 3 people, 5 people, 15 people?
Well,
where do you think you'll draw from on that?
I believe an effective group should probably be somewhere between 3 and 4, and then not including staff, but staff in addition to that.
Any current TOT council members you're looking at for that?
Well, of course, I love our council members. They're fantastic. They're super supportive. They're great industry partners. But I think it's time that we hear from other people in the community and some other voices. So we do have some ideas. I just think it would be a little premature for me to discuss that until I've been given approval.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this before we wrap up here. Do you think it was appropriate, and I warned you this question was coming, but do you think it was appropriate that there were efforts being made to secure a temporary site for this facility before the proposal was even presented to the board? That happened.
I think inquiries happen.
Yes.
I think it's important to clarify.
To put a temporary center at a place before we had a proposal to the board, a business plan,
There was
how
no
we could
ever
pay for
any
it.
proposal.
Yeah.
Correct. There was no proposal.
Right.
So why were
No
sites
proposal
being
for a temporary site. Nobody ever proposed.
why were sites being solicited?
So let me clarify that really quick, because it's a very simple answer.
Okay.
The reason is the Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center that currently runs our visitor center, the chairman, Travis Clark, came to the board and requested over a 60% increase to their TOT funding and gave us an ultimatum. They said, you either fund it or you won't have a visitor center. And they did not take any action at that meeting, and they told them they would not take action at the meeting because they actually presented during open comments. They weren't on the agenda. They didn't provide any information on their budgets or anything beforehand. And our chairman, out of courtesy, allowed them to go ahead and present, but said no action was going to be taken. After that ultimatum and increase, there was a council member who went out on his own.
The chairman?
And his own discretion. He was not the chairman at the time. He was the previous chairman.
Okay.
And started making inquiries. Because...
To be clear, we're talking about JDK.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And so I got a phone call from JD saying, hey, I went and looked at a couple places. I was like, oh my goodness, okay. Well, that's...
Without your knowledge.
Without my knowledge at all at that point. But I understand JD's sentiment. You know, this has not been an easy topic. It's been quite contentious since day one, it feels like. You know, we found out the way the county was handling the TOT funds were not the appropriate way to handle it. And we were advised by legal in the summer of 2021 that not only was I personally liable, the department was liable, the county was liable, and we could be sued at any point by any of the recipients of the TOT money for mishandling those funds and spending that money not appropriately and in accordance with the legislation. And that was actually advised by me by 2 people from the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
So we quickly remedied an issue because we didn't want to be sued. We didn't want to put our county at risk. And also the appropriation of those funds they just weren't being handled appropriately.
Okay.
And so we changed everything. And since that date, it's been a tough subject. And
Change is tough.
Change is tough. And, you know, people took it personally. And there has been a lot of attacks. And there's been a lot of opinions and editorials, not just articles, not just actually reporting the facts.
Guilty?
And, yes. Thank you for that.
Guilty as charged?
And it swayed people. And it didn't give an opportunity for this department, in my opinion, my editorial, right?
Sure.
What we're really doing here is truly for the benefit of our community.
The cart got ahead of the horse.
I think in some ways the story got bigger than the story should have ever been.
Okay.
And
so it's not that big a story?
I think it could be. I think it has a lot of potential to be.
Okay.
But I think that the story is really kind of dull right now.
Okay.
It's not as salacious as it has been presented.
Okay.
And so, but I do think it could be a big change to our community in a positive way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The opportunity is there and the potential is there. I do agree with that. We're going to end it up here because we don't want to run too long here. But I'm going to give you both an opportunity to have your say here at the end. This is the last question. A lot of times I end with a why question. So the question is why. That's what many people are asking. So I know you have already stated this, but I'm giving you an opportunity to have the final word. What is your motivation for taking on this challenge? And tell others in the community why they should be getting on board and getting behind it too. And I'm going to start with Rebecca and let you in.
Well, I am going to borrow a little bit from supervisors because even we are still assessing it. So maybe it's too soon for people to be getting on board or off board with it. But to have an open mind to potentially on board if we find that it's needed and truly will help in the way that we hope and we think has the possibility to. Okay. Lastly, I would just encourage people to continue to, freely share information and ideas, but to please do it based on factual information, to call our office, to reach out to us if you have any questions, and to know that we are committed to this community. We love Page Valley. We love its people. We love its businesses, and we love its visitors.
Wonderful. Nina, last word.
Well, I think Becca put it perfectly and summed it up really well. I mean, the reason for me and my why is because Page County deserves the best. And it is an idea. It is one, I believe, a great idea. And it's one that right now is the time. The momentum's here. People from out of our state or out of our country are even looking to invest in Page Valley. Why not us? Invest in our own place, in our own home. And I just believe this is a great opportunity for our community. And if the community speaks up and decides that it's not, right, then that's fine too. We're going to keep giving it our best. We want people to be engaged. Becca's absolutely right. Please contact our office if you have any questions. Our doors are open. We want to be engaged. We want to hear from what our residents want. We're here to serve the people of Page County first and foremost. And we're doing it in our capacity of tourism because that's how our office is funded. And so...
Well said. Well said. Well, I do know that your motivations are pure for you ladies, and I wish you the well as you go move forward. It's going to be a long process, probably. Anything in government is, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to Nina Fox and Rebecca Armstrong for joining me today. I really appreciate both of you being here today. And we're going to say one more thanks also to our sponsor once again, Luray Caverns, where you can hear music of symphonic quality from ancient stone formations on the great stalacpipe organ, the largest musical instrument in the world. Only at Luray Caverns. Visit them online at LurayCaverns.com to plan your trip today. And as we wrap up, folks, if you enjoy the show today, make sure you hit that like button, share it with a friend, and please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button as well on our YouTube channel. We'd also like to say thank you to Eleanor Arrington for all the behind-the-camera work today. And finally, make sure you visit all of our furry friends down at the Page County Animal Shelter and help them find a forever home. Until next week, I'm Randy Arrington saying enjoy that Page Valley living.